On this episode of the ThriveMore podcast, I interview Craig Moody. Craig is the founder and CEO of Shoot 360. This is a revolutionary basketball training program. And even if you're not into basketball, what you need to hear is his story and how he's created something new and unique. He also, it was off air, but talked about how he had to raise money and just the arduous process of that, but how he wouldn't stop and he kept after it. And finally, one guy came through and said, I'll fund the whole thing, because Craig would not quit. He kept putting himself in front of the right people, kept building his network. And now he has a very successful franchise with almost 40 open locations and many, many more to come. And he is helping the youth of America in addition to pro sports teams. This one's cool. In 2012, Craig opened the first Shoot 360 location in Beaverton, Oregon. Craig's passion, knowledge, and experiences in basketball have fueled Shoot 360's progress in developing the most technologically advanced and immersive basketball training and competition experience in the world. Following Craig's leadership and vision, Shoot 360 continues to test the limits of what technology and innovation can do in the sport. Craig, welcome to the ThriveMore podcast. How are you?
Great, Roger. It's great to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure, my pleasure. I was doing some research on you, of course, and your business and your brand, and I can't wait for you to share with the listeners what you've put together and what your product and customer experience is, because it's very, very unique. Before we get into that, you kind of have this extensive background in the sports world, and I would love to know what got you started in sports, and was this something from when you were a young kid and you've always been in it? Just walk us through what that genesis was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably like every other kid. I played football in the backyard and basketball in the driveway and soccer in the front yard, right? So all the things that kids do when they grow up. But ultimately, my passion kind of lied with basketball, and I started in junior high and then high school and then played a little bit of college basketball, and just ultimately from there went into I started with junior high coaching, then high school coaching, and then college coaching.
Yeah.
So that was really my path forward with basketball, is I just had a passion for it and kept pursuing it. Just kind of a lifetime career path as well as a lifetime passion.
Yeah. And when you were playing, like, I'm just curious, what position were you playing, and what school were you competing at?
Yeah, I actually played at a small Christian private school, and I played basically the point guard position or the two guard position, and that's in college. I played more the point guard position for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not real big, so had to use quickness and hopefully the understanding of the game to get myself through.
There's almost a business lesson there, right? Or a life lesson, use what you have and then maximize it. Right? Use what you have to
That's
your
right.
advantage, maximize. The same holds true in business. I would love to ask you your thoughts on how you've seen and how you've applied your learnings in sport, just, any sport, but really in sport and athletics, to business. Like, what analogies you've drawn. Of course, we always use sports analogies when we're explaining something, but actually at the granular level, how you've applied lessons from sports to business.
Yeah, it's interesting because coaching really is what really pushed me through, because I think that sports is a microcosm of what life is really like. And so what I've learned is, there's so many ups and downs in life in general, and just the persistence of deciding you're going to do something and not letting things get in your way. I mean, there's no way that you're going to have a perfectly clear path to anything you do in business or in life generally. And so you really have to make up your mind that this is what I want to do, and I'm going to figure out a way to get it done. And that's really been probably the biggest takeaway for me. And one of the things I always tell our team is we're on a journey here, and there is a destination by championship, by definition and all that. But really, even when the clock runs out and we lose a game, we just say, look, the clock ran out. We didn't have enough time to win. So we're moving on to the next one. And that's kind of how I view business too. We're going to keep going.
I appreciate that answer. I interviewed, man, this was way back when we started this podcast. Like, I think it was episode 3, Matt Doherty, who played alongside Michael Jordan at Chapel Hill, and then later went back to, he coached Notre Dame, head coach of Notre Dame basketball, and then later was asked to be the head coach at Chapel Hill. He'll tell you, he's very open about it. He wrote a book about it. He actually got fired from there and learned a ton of life lessons, the way he went into the program and tried to change it. And when really it was Dean Smith's program, and, he should have probably pulled Dean Smith in more. But what I loved from that interview with him, Craig, he really talked about failure and how, in business, we look at failure as, oh, you failed, you're in a box, you lost. And in sports, it's, well, I just figured out that I need to work on my 3-pointer, or I just figured out I need to spend more time at the free throw line, or I just figured out I need to keep my eyes open for the assist because I didn't during this game, and I need to go practice that. And it's almost like failure in sports is a way to show where you need to improve, which is the same for business, except so many people in business, they think I failed, I'm done. And that's just, no, you just figured out what not to do. I'm curious if you've experienced that same kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think, there is some degree of business where you think if I fail, it's over, meaning it could crush a company or it could close it down. I think what you try to do is you try to mitigate some risk by the decisions you make, but you also realize, look, we're going into this and it might not work. And so if it doesn't work, okay, let's figure out what we learned and pivot, and the next decision will be better. I think just like history, the thing to try to do is not repeat things that don't work. Yeah. And we look at that really carefully. When we make mistakes, and we do all the time, we assess them together as a team. And then we ultimately say, okay, now what we learned, what do we do next? And I think that's just a process of being in business, like you said, just like sports.
Yeah. I love you said, don't repeat the mistake, right? There's 3 kinds of people. There's dumb people, smart people, and geniuses. Dumb people touch a hot stove, it burns them, and they touch it again. A smart person touches the hot stove, it burns them. They don't touch it again. A genius is told, don't touch the hot stove, it'll burn you. And they never touch the hot stove, right? That's strive to be a genius, strive to learn from others. Well, then explain to us and listeners, what Shoot 360 is, because it is a unique concept. And some of the videos I've seen, the pictures are pretty impressive.
Yeah, basically what we do is we teach 3 core disciplines in basketball is our emphasis, and it's around shooting, passing, and ball handling. And we use machine vision to do that. So in essence, we in real time give kids or players immediate feedback for corrections so they can get better. And so if you think about it from a macro perspective or a lifetime of somebody, as an example in shooting, if it took 10 years to become an elite shooter, we're shrinking that down to 2 or 3 years because we're giving them real-time feedback. We're giving them the data back, the stats. And here's what's really exciting about it, Roger, is that we take them and we do it like an immersive video game. So we put them like they're actually in a video game. So the training is very authentic, but they're competing against each other. So you can be in Riverside, California or New York and play me in Portland in real time. So it's very exciting because it's culturally driven. And it's where kids are at today and where players are at. I mean, NBA players and millennials are there with the whole gaming culture. And so for us, we're able to enter that, but still be really authentic to the game.
So how did you come up with that? Because that is different, that's unique, and that adds a lot of value to a young player working hard to get better. So how did this evolve?
Yeah, the story I tell is that my oldest son was starting to play competitive AAU or club basketball. And one day he had his team over and they were in our bonus or family room playing video games. And they were playing 2K, which is the basketball video game. It was a beautiful day outside and we have a court. And I said, why don't you guys go outside and play on the court? And they all looked at me. These are probably 11, 12-year-olds. And they all looked at me and said, nah, we rather play video games. And so I was like, man, I just did not grow up that way.
Yeah.
So I turned and walked out and I looked at my wife and I said, if I could make a gym like a video game, I'd have it made. And that kind of resonated with me. And so I knew about some of the emerging technologies that were in the market. They were using them for testing. I thought they were using them the wrong way. And I just kind of had an idea to take it and gamify it and use it for training. And ultimately, that's what I did. I built a gym at night. I'd been in the real estate business as well and had just come through the Great Recession, as everybody calls it. And so I was like a little bit timid to jump into another thing because I had survived it. But I leased a building and I went at night and I started working on it till I got the concept right. And then I ended up launching it.
Wow. How many iterations did you go? Did you bring your son in just to keep trying things, or how did that work to start to perfect that product?
Yeah, it was interesting because I don't want it to sound like we knew everything, but we got it right in really the first couple tries. We just had to make some small tweaks, but the kind of the framework and vision we had for it turned out to be pretty close.
Wow. So that's fantastic. And so it sounds like you were a coach earlier, then got into the real estate business, which I would call probably more of an entrepreneurial venture, depending on what sector of that you were in. After that, did you want to did you enjoy, I guess, the journey of being an entrepreneur? And then this was just the next iteration of you being an entrepreneur? Or did you say, I always kind of laugh because some people are born to it and I just fell backwards into it and said, I don't want to be in corporate America any longer. That was like, I ran from something instead of running to something, but I ran to the right thing. But I'd love to know what your internal dialogue was coming out of the Great Recession and starting this new thing. Was it just because that's in your bones? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. It runs a little bit through my family. I think I had my father had bought one small rental yard in when I graduated from college, and I helped him build that up into a small regional chain of yards, and we sold those. So I kind of went through the mergers acquisition process. I led that. Coming out of that, I left and I had been coaching part-time. I went into full-time coaching at the collegiate level, came out, went into the real estate kind of construction business. I actually was forced into starting a building company because you couldn't sell lots during the recession. So I started building houses to sell lots. So I went through that, kind of that process. And then all of those experiences kind of converged for me to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to take the risk and do the basketball side of it. And the reason why, Roger, there's a couple of reasons why. Because I had the rental yards, I was in charge of all the greenfield startups and building those out. And then I came into the basketball side. I'd been coaching basketball, and then I had the real estate experience. And so those all kind of converged, and really the experiences that I had, no different than anybody else. They look back at their experiences and say, like with you in corporate America, you had a bunch of experiences probably through training and leadership and all those that said, hey, I can do this. It's not comfortable, but you got to jump at some point. And I'm fairly comfortable jumping. I don't believe you're going to get anywhere unless you're willing to take a risk.
Yeah. I actually had a guest on recently, and I'm reading finishing reading his book. And the title of the book is 10 Seconds of Insane Courage, which I just love because anything in life, right? You just need that first 10 seconds of insane courage, and then you'll figure the rest out. But man, that first 10 seconds is the hardest part of a business decision and a business venture. And it sounds like
Yeah.
you were more comfortable in that, which I commend you on that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, well, it's probably like you said, insane courage and emphasis on insane, but
That's awesome. So you build this first one, you really feel you've gotten the product pretty darn right. How do you start growing then? How, and we'll get to, because you're at 50 locations now, and we'll get to that, but how did you start growing from you're building this gym at night and this prototype, let's call it, at night? What's the next chapter in that book?
yeah, so that I'm being completely transparent. When I say I got it right, I thought I got the design right. I didn't get like all the technology right and all that. That was a kind of a bet. As an example, when we first started, we have big screens over our baskets now, and our passing and ball handling weren't developed. And the reason why is the technology that we were using early on. We have a partner that actually developed the engine for it, but it was all in what two-dimensional, and so everything was just a straight line. The bet that I made was that over time we could develop the 3D part of it, where we could capture a ball in space anywhere. And if we could do that, that would allow us to get the ball anywhere on the court, and then add passing and ball handling and all those things, and truly have a training business that mattered. So I kind of compartmentalized that, if you will, and I went to developing the main part of the business, which was, hey, making shots, getting in, getting reps in, doing ball handling, but not with a big technology emphasis behind it. It was more like, this is where it's going. By those standards, back in 2012, we were technologically ahead of everybody, but I was betting that we could get there. Two of my kind of partners that I started out with were software guys that I talked into quitting their really nice software jobs, development jobs, and coming into a startup.
Yeah.
So we rolled the dice on that a little bit, but we felt like after thinking it through that we could get to it, and 4 years later we did.
Is the Shoot 360, the 360 part of it, the fact that you can almost, well, I keep thinking of like the movie The Matrix, where you can kind of go all the way around and see, the what they call bullet time or whatever, but is that where does the name come from?
Yeah, originally, so I used to run basketball camps that we call it developing the complete player was the tagline. So 360 was that we were developing the complete player. The shoot
Gotcha.
was the number one most fun thing to do in the game is shoot the ball.
Sure.
And so we wanted to incorporate that. This is fun. It's about the whole player, but we knew that everybody that knew about basketball, that would resonate with them. Yeah, I love to shoot, right? It's the number one fundamental of the game is to put the ball in the hoop.
What is then the journey from your first studio to, because at some point you decided to franchise, I believe, and now you have, if my research is correct, you have almost 50 locations open. And is that correct?
Yeah, we're at roughly 35 open, but about 17 in different phases of development right now.
Okay.
Actually,
yes.
20 after Friday's meeting.
Okay. So we've got 35 open, 20 in development. What was the growth plan to go from 1 to 35 open, soon to be 55 open? Walk me through that.
Yeah, so I think, we never started with the idea that we were franchising. And to be honest, the motivating factor for me, I need to say this so it makes sense to people, but the reason that I really did it to start with is when I was coaching, I could impact 15 to 30 players a year.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I coach is because, not different than anybody else, somewhere in your life, you're passing on something that's meaningful to you, right? Where you want to say, hey, I want to give back in some form. That's really what was pushing me with the basketball was I just loved the game. It did so much for me. I wanted to give back. So when I looked at it, what I was trying to do was use leverage to impact kids. So my wife and I, ultimately why we put the money up was we decided, look, we could impact 15 to 30 kids a year doing coaching, or potentially we could impact hundreds, thousands, and maybe hundreds of thousands. Now we're talking about millions, right? So that was really the push for the business, and how we were looking at it from a growth standpoint. Could we find like-minded individuals that wanted to invest in the company that could see that vision? So I say that because franchising wasn't really, we didn't know really how we would grow it yet. We were just saying, could we operate 1, 2, or 3? So what we did is we opened the first one, which is about 5,000 square feet. And then we opened another one a year later in 2013 in Vancouver, Washington, just across the river from our Beaverton at 10,000 square feet. And then we paused because the technology we were starting to see some success. We knew we had to work on it, and we just couldn't scale it without building the infrastructure behind it, even to 3 or 4 locations. So we paused and started working on the technology, the 3D piece, the profiles, all that. In 2016, we opened one in Los Angeles that was 20,000 square feet.
Holy moly.
That was a hit as well. And then we decided, all right, let's go test it in basketball country. So we opened one in 2017 in Indiana.
Wow.
In Indianapolis, with Fred Jones, who now currently owns 2 franchises as well. But at that point, we realized, look, the best way to grow this is franchising. After, we could bootstrap it and try debt, but it was just, we knew that we have about 27 or 8 patents, and there's a life to patents, and we needed to get the business going, and we have a partner that we license and work with on those patents. And so we decided, hey, let's kick this into gear. We thought franchising was the best opportunity. So in 2019, we launched our first franchise with Rodney Stuckey in Kirkland, Washington, and it took off. And then we launched another one in January in Rochester Hills, Michigan. And then we were just about ready to open our third with the Warriors and Golden State. And then all of a sudden, COVID hits.
The world stopped,
The world stops. And we managed to get 16 of them open during COVID, which was a miracle in and of itself. And then kind of worked through that like everybody did, and then came out of that. And during that time, we were building a team. I actually hired a CEO that was a big sports guy, had taken a company public and had grown several companies. He had been on my advisory board before, brought him in. And then we started building the team together, and he's done a magnificent job, of course. And we're, at this point, now we're full business development team, marketing, CFO, all the pieces that you would typically have in a company. So yeah, it's been just kind of that growth trajectory has been interrupted by COVID, which then was supply chain and construction and real estate, problems. Cause we lease light industrial real estate or build it. And when COVID happened, that went from like a 6 or 7% vacancy rate down to 1 or 2 in some markets.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. As you know, I don't have any advertisements nor sponsorships on this podcast. My only ask of you, the listener, is that you share this podcast with someone that you know, a friend, a family member, a coworker, or a colleague who may benefit from this information, may benefit from today's guest, from the value that they're sharing with the audience, with you, the listener. When you share this podcast and our audience grows, it allows me to book more and more guests who have a great message, great nuggets of wisdom that you can benefit from, and again, your network can benefit from. So please, right now, push that share button, send it to somebody that you care about, and let's get back to the interview. So 20,000 square, I don't know, I should know, but how many square feet an average basketball court is? So when you have 20,000 square feet in Los Angeles, is that 4 courts, 5 courts, or is it just all one?
Well, the way that we do it, we do training units. So a typical basketball court with all the sidelines and everything is around 6,000, 6,500 square feet. So it's equivalent, to kind of 3 courts.
Okay.
But we put training units in. So we have shooting courts, which are
Gotcha.
pie shaped.
Yep.
And then our skill courts are developed just for the passing and ball handling side. So in that facility, we have 8 training units. So one skill court, one shooting court, make a training unit, and then we have a full court, and then that was kind of my flagship store because it was right in the heart of Los Angeles, which is one of the basketball meccas in the country. So we have it's just a big mezzanine, big entry area. We've since really economized that and shrunk it down for more efficiency.
I'm just curious, I know what retail space, we're in the retail, Class A retail space with our brands. What has the per square foot lease rates in the light industrial business park kind of area? What is that? Is that done the same thing? Because retail's gone, it's gone up in price for sure.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. No question about industrial. When we started, it was, somewhere around $7 annually.
Yeah.
So 60 cents a square foot.
Yeah.
And now in most markets, you're $1 to $1.50, so 12 to 18 plus triple net.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what retail used to be. That's what's funny is that's what
Yeah,
retail,
exactly.
18 was like a fair deal in a retail space. Yeah. That's so Craig, what if, a lot of people listening to this show are entrepreneurs and or looking to become an entrepreneur, getting ready to make that jump, or at least considering it. So what have been one or two, even if you could, share 3 on whatever, any 1, 2, or 3 hard lessons that you've learned that, and again, those lessons are what makes us who we are today. So I don't know if you'd go back and change it, but what are some of the hard lessons that you've learned that you'd love to share with the audience so that maybe they don't make that same mistake?
I'd say one of the things is making sure you do a full financial forecast on everything you kind of move forward on. And I guess I have a real bias towards action. So sometimes I will jump before I've completely assessed everything. Hindsight's always perfect, right? So I would say that's been a couple hard lessons for me is just, and then one of the other things is, there's a great book out there is I think it's called Make the Main Thing, or the one thing.
Yeah.
And the other hard lessons I've learned at times are when I try to do too much. And when you're in the technology business, the discipline of saying no is just as important as the discipline of saying yes.
Yeah.
And so I've made some of those mistakes too, because when you're an entrepreneur, you have to do all the things that nobody else wants to do. And that sometimes means wearing 10 hats. And so you kind of get this mentality that you can do anything. The problem is when you start to scale a business and you move it into where it's actually a bigger business, you have to have enough sense to say, okay, I can't do that much anymore. And if not, you're going to hurt the business. And I hurt the business a couple of times that way.
I mean, it's well documented. It's called the founder's trap. And we all fall prey to it at some point because you do get used to doing everything. And usually we can do it pretty darn well, but not the best. You can't be the best at everything. And letting go of that, though, that's the founder's trap. It's really, really hard to let that go, still guide it, but allow others to contribute and make decisions and whatnot. So not unusual that you experience that by any means. So what advice would you, if you could go back and same kind of question, but a little different, if you could go back and you were talking to your younger self back in, if my dating is correct, 2008, 2009, right before you started this, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I probably on the technology side would have said dig deeper in terms of understanding what I was actually walking into, and just spend a little more time in preparation there. Yeah, you know what, Roger, that'd be the main thing. I'd just say to my younger self, a little more preparation before I dove in.
Yeah.
And especially knowing the business that you're getting into and trying to understand it as much as you can. Now, I will say that when you're doing something that somebody else hasn't done before, there's no roadmap. And so there's times when you can't do a lot of research, right?
Yep.
And so if you're going into the restaurant business, there's tons of ways to research that. When you're doing things that are a little more innovative and technology based and kind of leading edge, then there's not as much opportunity to do that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I struggle, I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with, if you wait till you have all the information, it's too late. Like the opportunity's
Right.
gone. But if you don't have enough, you put yourself at much more risk than you should be, than you really needed to be. It's trying to figure out to use your term jump. And I love that because I say that a lot, it's time to jump, to know when to jump. And I've just had this rule, like if I have 70 to 80% of the information right, and I know it's right, we got to go. And you know what? That 20% could be a huge red flag. You shouldn't have done it. Bad decision. But we never know. So it's like, just to me, give me 70 to 80%. Let's get the facts. Do we know everything? No. Do we know enough? Yeah. Then we got to go. Speed wins. Let's
Yep.
go. But
That's exactly right.
but it's like you said, what you call it, Monday morning quarter. It's easy to know afterwards. Like, well, that was dumb. Well, it wasn't at the time though. It was the best decision we could make at the time. And as long as you string enough of the best decisions that you can make with information you have together, you should come up a winner more often than not. So you do have, that was interesting to know that you have some patent protection, which is great, which does mean speed wins in your situation, because you need to dominate the market before those patents can be knocked off. But as the technology evolves, obviously you have your patents, but people can then over-engineer and engineer around and even maybe improve upon the technology, because when you can make money in America, there's 20 people deep lined up behind you to steal your lunch money. That's capitalism, and thank God, because that moves our country forward. So it's coming. So as the technology evolves, what is your plan then to stay ahead of that curve, or to at least stay with it, if not ahead of it?
Yeah, I think two things. First of all, our partners, which is Noah Basketball, and Alan Marty and John Carter is the CEO there. Their patent strategy is brilliant. We work with them on that and developing, continue. If you look at a picket fence, each time you have a patent, you have the patent itself, and then you have the claims that go around it. And essentially you're building this wider and wider picket fence. So it's harder and harder to get around. And what they do such a great job of is, we develop new stuff, they look at where the gaps are and keep filling it. So to your point, there's never any way to 100% assure it, but what you're really trying to do is create this big moat, or this big fence that protects it.
Yeah.
So that's how we look at it. The second thing that's been so valuable to us, Roger, is that a lot of people will develop technologies in different industries. In ours, they'll develop them, but they don't really have a way to monetize them. And so we've kind of become the epicenter of where you can take it to the consumer and monetize it, right? And so what we're doing constantly is looking for what the next innovation is. The tip of the iceberg is way overused, but the reason people say that is, here's the tip, and underneath it, here's this huge iceberg that's underneath it there.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's really where we're at, is there's just so much opportunity for us to continue to innovate and grow and take it to the next level, everywhere from, athlete prediction with all the data. I mean, we have over 600 million data points from our facilities now, and they're growing at millions a month exponentially, right? To the opportunities with competition and broadcasting and all the different things that we can do with the technology. So for us, our one of our core values is constant innovation, and I think that's one of the places we really excel, and will continue to grow the business.
Craig, I can only imagine at some point you guys had a fireside chat among the partners and investors that the NBA's got to be interested in this technology, even in acquiring this technology, right? Like I'm not expecting to share any secret sauce or anything, or secret company secrets, but that just seems to be every Division I college and every NBA team. I mean, and what a great thing to have it at colleges. I think about Moneyball, right? About Moneyball and looking at what are the, so if you what you can share about that, I would love for you to just talk about if you did have any exploratory conversations, or if that's something that's still on the radar.
Yeah, I mean, we have several partners that are MBA teams, and we've definitely, you know, people have shown interest, many strategic partners, on how they can use the technology. And then, the thing with basketball in any game really is you want to grow the game. Ultimately, you want to grow it. And how do you grow it? You give people more confidence and skill to play it so they have more fun, right?
Yep.
Like, what discourages someone from playing golf long term? It's if they go out and they can't swing the club right and the ball's going everywhere. And that, after a while, it's just like, I don't want to do that. Well, what we know about the game is that if kids have more preparation and they have more confidence, that grows it. And ultimately that grows the fan base and everything that goes with it. And I think if you were just to look at the NBA, or you were to look at the NBA teams, or you were to look at the companies that kind of support that whole growth ecosystem, we would fit into that really well. And I don't know where we fit yet. And we look at it, but we don't overthink it, because our mission is to grow the game and to do it using technology. So we feel like at some point there's an intersection that could make sense for everybody, but we're just not there yet.
Oh, that's good. I just couldn't help but ask, thinking about the value. And I just saw some poster, some news article about the top 10 recent sport contracts. And, they're up to like seven. Yeah. The Dodgers just paid $700 million. I mean, that is unreal. That's the word contract. Like in the top 10, I want to say the lowest valued contract was above $300 million. I mean, that's the lowest, was $300 million. It's just, that's multi-year, but still just mind-boggling. Yeah.
And our partner, this is interesting too. I want to bring this up real quick, because you hit it on nail on the head. So 28 of the 30 NBA teams use a version of our technology in their practice facilities. And I think there's roughly 100 NCAA Division I teams that are using it. And wow. The consumer side that we're putting out, we're working with NOAA to bring that more into, how they use it. Because you think about it now, I think NBA players, they're very young compared to me, and they came up through the video game games, world, right? So they used to carry shoes in their backpacks. They carry game consoles in their backpacks now. Yeah. So that connection is very real. And so we think that's just going to continue to morph there too.
You're in a good spot. You are in a good spot, man. Well played and well deserved. You mentioned, I think the book you may have been referencing earlier is The One Thing by Gary Keller. I don't know if that's but yeah, great book, which just leads me to my next question is, if you were to, you've got a lot of experience in athletics, a lot of experience in entrepreneurship, now in franchising, you're working with some of the, the biggest franchises, being sports teams in the world now. Is there a book that you've read, it doesn't even have to be recently, but that you've read where you read it and when you set it down, you thought, okay, I am putting that into action. That's not just a one-time read. I'm probably going back through that. Is there one book that you could recommend to the listeners that really moved the needle for you intellectually and business-wise?
Well, I referenced that book that you talked about there, because I think he was right about keeping focus and understanding, okay, what's the next thing that moves the needle for the company, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And so we've had to, like I said, the biggest struggle for us is, what do we say no to? And it's not always just no indefinitely, it's no for now.
Yeah.
And what do we do that moves the needle forward? And that's not always the popular decision, right? Because it's a strategic decision. And there's a lot of overlays to that and a lot of considerations. So, even with franchisees, we try to listen really closely, but they can't always see what's best for them either. And we kind of can in the seat that we're in, because not only do we get all the information from all the franchisees, but then we kind of know, okay, we have the confidence to do this and make the next lift in the business. And so I would say that focus is that book. I've read that a couple of times. I couldn't even remember the name of it. That goes to show, but I have read it a couple of times, and it just reminds me of how focused you need to be when you're running a business.
Yeah. The one thing, Gary Keller, who's the Keller of Keller Williams Realty, he's a multi-billionaire, and he's stuck to his knitting and did really, really well. So I love that you've talked about you want to keep evolving the game. You want to grow the game, which is such a beautiful long-term mission that is never satisfied. You can always do more to help grow the game. So a couple last questions, and this one's not meant to be morbid by any means, but if you could fast forward to the end of your very full life, but it is the end of your life, and now we're at your funeral, and you're looking down from above, and a loved one is reading your eulogy, but they're only allowed to use 3 words. They can pick 3 different words to describe you. What 3 words do you hope who's ever standing in front of everyone that's talking about you and your life, what 3 words do you hope that they choose to describe you?
Well, I mean, people don't use this as much in society as they probably should, but just probably love, genuine and care and concern, right? I would say probably just love, care, and concern.
That's great. Great. No right or wrong answer. You're looking at me like, is that good? No,
no
right or wrong answer, man. That's you.
I'm processing in my own head. I just haven't answered that question I've done some of the head to dead exercises of kind of, but I haven't really thought about it from that standpoint.
The reason I asked that question to every guest, the reason I do is because probably about a year ago, I did an exercise where I sat down and I wrote my eulogy. Wrote like a full page eulogy, a speech that someone would read about me. And it was so powerful for me to do that. It was humbling. It really brought me down to earth, because when you write your eulogy, what you're writing is the life that you should start living right now. If you already haven't, if you're not already living that life, then start living it right now. And every day you wake up, start living that. And so instead of having you read your entire eulogy, I just, what are the 3 words? Because, man, that's what we should be striving for every day, like love, caring and compassion. And that's, I can tell just by your personality and just who you are and what you're trying to do. I feel that from you, even through the screen. But man, it takes it right down to the brass tacks when you write your eulogy and then you read it back to yourself like, okay, I got to getting busy right now to make sure I can fulfill on all this, It's a good exercise.
Yeah, I'm going to change my last word after hearing you say that. I'd say optimism. I think that's a quality that you have to kind of develop, and it's a perspective of how you look at the world.
Gratitude. Yeah, for sure. So with that, it's kind of a dovetail question. Craig, if you had a magic wand and you could wave it and make one material change to the world. So we wake up tomorrow and the world is different in one material way. According to Craig, how is the world different tomorrow?
Unity.
Been getting a lot of that lately. Boy, we need that.
Yeah.
I've heard everything from, just compassion to conversation to, understanding others and first seeking and unity. And the world needs that right now. It's needed for a while, but I think it's needed it more than ever right now, quite frankly. But yeah, well, just as important of a question is, how do people find out more about you, follow what Shoot 360 is doing, or if they're interested in franchising with you, what do they do? So what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, for me personally, I'm on LinkedIn, so anybody can find me there. From Shoot 360, if you just want to learn more about what we do, our website is shoot360.com. If you're interested in franchising, we have on the website a franchising questionnaire under franchising, and you can fill that out, and somebody on our business development team will reach out immediately within 24 hours and and introduce themselves and start that process of giving you more information and getting FDD in your hands.
Awesome. Well, Craig, you have a winner of a product. There's no doubt about it. You've filled a need, which that's entrepreneurship in its essence, is identifying and filling a need that the world could benefit from, which you've done. And the sport can certainly benefit from it. I can only imagine the young people that you're going to interact with and that your brand will interact with will only be better off, and the confidence and the discipline that it'll instill. So I'm so excited for you and this brand, man. Good luck.
Thanks, Roger. I appreciate that. We're excited about the future for sure.
Awesome. And then lastly, just I'm grateful. Talk about being, grateful and optimistic. I'm grateful for you taking the time today to come on the ThriveMore podcast and just share with us, because this has been fun, and you're just a great guest. So I appreciate you.
Thanks. Appreciate being on it. Appreciate you as well, Roger.
You bet. Thank you for tuning in to the ThriveMore podcast. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for any of the resources that we mentioned during the podcast. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you have access to the latest and the greatest. You can connect with me on any of the socials at Real Roger Martin. And be sure to check out our website, ThriveMoreBrands.com. There you'll find information on the brands we support and information on franchising. Thanks again for tuning in.